Hello, friends. This is Professor Googlaw. On my channel, you mostly watch videos about the beautiful world around us. But today, it's a little different. What is it about? Keep watching to find out. The Space Shuttle Discovery STS-124 mission as part of the Space Shuttle program flew in 2008. In that year, the Discovery orbiter flew to the International Space Station. The mission's objectives were to perform repairs on the ISS mobile transporter and to test the extension of the robotic arm. It was the third spaceflight for Commander Mark E. Kelly, while the rest of the crew were rookies who were about to experience their first voyage into the great depths of space. The mission lasted a total of about 13 days and 18 hours. The spacecraft covered an incredible 5.7 million miles above the Earth's surface and orbited our planet 217 times in just 1.5 weeks. On June 4, 2008, it was time to return home. All 8 crew members returned to Earth and re-established a stable vertical position. The re-entry process was quite lengthy and took most of the day. At 11:30 Universal Time, the payload was nominal, and the sky above the Kennedy Space Center was clear. In these frames, we see that the re-entry at approximately 2:10 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time went smoothly. And at 3:15 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the Discovery spacecraft landed on the runway at the Space Center. Pilot Kenneth T. Ham expertly handled the deceleration process. By the way, a funny fact about the Discovery crew: during the flight, the NASA team woke up the crew by playing a musical composition prepared specifically by the friends and families of some of the crew members. By the way, while in orbit, the crew listened to Lenny Kravitz, John Fogerty, and U2. The Space Shuttle Endeavour STS-127 conducted its 23rd flight in 2009. The mission's objective was to install the last 2 components of the Japanese experimental module on the exposed facility in the exposed section of the experimental logistics module. When the shuttle docked with the ISS in July 2009, it set a record for the most people simultaneously in space on one spacecraft, with 13 people on board. It's one thing to break world records on Earth, but breaking records in space is really cool. Shuttle Commander Mark Polanski completed his 3rd and final spaceflight during this mission. Crew member David Wolf surpassed him a little, as he went into space for the 4th time. The entire mission lasted about 15 days and 16 hours. The shuttle traveled approximately 6.5 million miles above the Earth's surface and orbited the planet 248 times. The crew performed a total of 5 spacewalks. Japanese astronaut Koichi Wakata, a crew member, landed the shuttle on July 31 at the Kennedy Space Center. For re-entry, conditions had to be ideal, with the sky being absolutely clear, so that the astronauts could safely return home. Although some of the shuttle's protective foam burned up during liftoff, the spacecraft remained in good enough condition to land safely. The 4th operational flight for the crew exchange of the International Space Station by the American private spacecraft Crew Dragon of SpaceX, SpaceX Crew 4. In recent years, NASA's budget has been cut. Of course, they will continue to launch satellites and telescopes into orbit, but fewer and fewer astronauts have the opportunity to explore space. In such situations, private companies and their money are very helpful. Elon Musk and his company SpaceX are doing amazing things, sending rockets into orbit and then bringing them back intact. Musk even sent ordinary people into space. In April 2022, the Crew Dragon spacecraft and its 4-person crew embarked on a mission. The spacecraft delivered 3 NASA astronauts and 1 European astronaut to the ISS. Their mission was called Minerva, and lasted a very long time, 170 days. During their entire journey, the spacecraft covered an incredible 71.9 million miles and orbited the Earth 2,720 times. After launch, the spacecraft took a whopping 16 hours to dock with its module. It must have been exhausting. Unlike other missions in today's video, this one caused a real stir. Instead of simply landing like Endeavour or Discovery, the SpaceX team landed in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean near the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. The descent vehicles were lowered by parachutes, ensuring the softest possible landing. As soon as the astronauts reached the shore, they were immediately taken to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston for checks. The NASA Space Shuttle Atlantis STS-129 mission was launched on November 16, 2009. The mission was relatively short, lasting only 10 days and 19 hours. The spacecraft traveled 7.15 million miles and completed 171 orbits around the Earth. The mission objective was to transport and install necessary equipment, including 2 orientation gyroscopes, a high-pressure oxygen tank for the airlock module, tanks of nitrogen and ammonia, a pump for the station cooling system, spare parts for the robotic manipulator, and a device for charging and discharging solar battery accumulators. Additionally, equipment for amateur radio communication, ship tracking, and a spare set of S-band antennas were delivered to the station. Unfortunately, this was one of the last missions of the Space Shuttle program. For many members of the crew, this mission also became their last trip into Earth's orbit. On November 27, when it was time for the Atlantis to return home, the sky over the Kennedy Space Center was clear. The spacecraft began re-entry into the atmosphere over the Indian Ocean with its rear facing forward. Interestingly, what do astronauts feel like after 10 days of living without gravity? The atmosphere significantly slowed the spacecraft down to 211 miles per hour, approximately Mach 6, before landing. The shuttle touched down on the Earth's surface at around 9 a.m., with the pilot's cabin playing the song "Home Sweet Home" by Motley Crue. Venera 9. A space mission doesn't always mean a manned landing on the moon or a launch into open space. The first space probe, Sputnik, was launched into orbit by the Soviet Union in 1957 during the space race. And the USSR could have continued to send satellites and cosmonauts into orbit for many years. One of the greatest achievements of the Soviet space program is Venera 9 inches an unmanned flight to Venus. It consisted of an orbital vehicle and a lander. It was launched on June 8, 1975, and had a mass of 10,869 pounds. The Venera 9 inches orbital vehicle was the first spacecraft to reach the orbit of Venus, and the lander was the first to show images from the surface of another planet. The lander was enclosed in a spherical shell before landing to protect it from the high temperature during entry into the planet's atmosphere. Then, this sphere was separated by explosive bolts, and a 3-poled parachute was deployed, which slowed the lander to a speed of 164 feet per second at an altitude of 39 miles above the planet. The descent through the cloud layer took about 20 minutes, during which the lander measured the atmosphere and transmitted information by radio to the orbital vehicle. The atmosphere of Venus near the surface was so dense that this shield provided a descent speed of 23 feet per second. And so in 1975, we got the first ever photographs from the surface of Venus. It wasn't the last time spacecraft landed on Venus, but the first time was, of course, the most memorable. Friends, don't hesitate to write comments under the video about what else you would like to learn. I will definitely fulfill your wish. Bye for now.